A simple visit to the bank turned into a nightmare for 78-year-old Margaret Chen. But no one expected that Hollywood's most beloved actor would step in and change everything. Some say dignity has a price. On that day, Keanu Reeves proved it was priceless. Before we continue the story, tell us in the comment below, where are you watching from? And if you like these kinds of stories, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow at 7 p.m. we have an amazing fresh story lined up for you. Margaret Chen had always prided herself on her independence. At 78, she still maintained her cozy little apartment in downtown Los Angeles, lovingly cared for her vibrant orchids, and managed her finances on her own. Her husband James had passed away 5 years prior, leaving behind modest savings and a daily routine she found comfort in: a morning Tai Chi session at the park and weekly visits to her local bank branch. That particular Tuesday morning began like any other. Margaret wore her favorite powder blue cardigan, the one James had given her on their 4th anniversary, and carefully pinned her silver hair into a neat bun. She needed to deposit her Social Security check and withdraw some cash for her granddaughter's upcoming birthday. It seemed simple enough, or so she thought. The First National Bank had changed since her last visit 2 weeks ago. Familiar faces were gone, replaced by younger staff who didn't recognize her. The warm brown and beige tones of the interior had been swapped for sterile whites and grays, what people today called modern. Even the comfortable armchairs she used to rest on while waiting had vanished, replaced by cold, minimalist metal stools that looked more like art installations than furniture. "Next, please," called a voice from teller 3. Margaret stepped forward, clutching her handbag and the neatly filled-out deposit slip. Behind the counter sat Bradley Cooper, not the actor, as he liked to joke, but a 32-year-old assistant manager recently transferred from the downtown branch. His crisp white shirt and perfectly knotted tie screamed efficiency, but his eyes never met those of the customers he served. "Good morning," Margaret said with a gentle smile, sliding her Social Security check and deposit slip across the counter. "I'd also like to withdraw $200 for my granddaughter's birthday, please." Bradley barely glanced at the papers. "ID and account number?" Margaret opened her bag and paused. Her hands trembled slightly as she searched through the familiar compartments of the small leather wallet James had gifted her 20 years ago. It wasn't in its usual spot. She checked again, this time more thoroughly, feeling the weight of impatient sighs behind her in the growing line. "I must have left my ID at home," she said softly, her cheeks flushing. "But I've been coming to this branch for over 30 years. Ms. Rodriguez usually helps me. Is she here today?" "Rodriguez retired last month," Bradley replied curtly, already motioning toward the next window sign. "We cannot complete any transaction without a valid ID. Bank policy." Margaret's heart sank. "Please, I know my account number by heart. It's 247A553. "Ma'am," Bradley interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "I can't help you without an ID. There are people waiting." The redness in Margaret's cheeks deepened. Behind her, someone muttered something about old people slowing things down. She could feel the stares, the judgment, the impatience radiating from the crowd. "Could I perhaps speak with the branch manager?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Bradley's lips curled into a tight smile. "I'm the assistant manager, ma'am. And as I said, without a valid ID, there's nothing I can do. You'll have to come back another time." Margaret clutched her bag tighter. "My granddaughter's birthday is tomorrow. I've never had a problem before. Couldn't you just—" "Security," Bradley called loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Please escort this woman out. She's holding up the line." The silence that followed in the bank lobby was deafening. Margaret stood frozen as a young security guard approached hesitantly. She could feel tears welling up in her eyes, but decades of dignity wouldn't let them fall. Not here, not now. At that very moment, the bank's glass doors swung open. A tall figure in a black motorcycle jacket stepped in, holding a helmet under one arm. The morning light glinted off his dark hair, streaked with silver at the temples. Even before he removed his sunglasses, a wave of recognition swept through the crowd. Keanu Reeves had arrived, and the atmosphere inside the First National Bank was about to change drastically. He stopped at the entrance, scanning the scene. His eyes moved from Margaret's trembling hands to Bradley's rigid posture, and something in his expression shifted. Without a word, he walked straight to teller 3, stepping beside Margaret. "Is there a problem here?" His voice was calm, but it carried unmistakable weight. Bradley's demeanor changed instantly. His eyes widened with recognition. Mr. Reeves, no problem. Just a routine banking matter. This lady doesn't have valid ID, and I see, Keanu said, turning toward Margaret. Ma'am, would you mind telling me what happened? Margaret looked up at him, startled by the genuine concern in his eyes. As she explained her situation, her voice grew stronger. She told him about her 30 years as a loyal customer, about Ms. Rodriguez who used to help her, and about the birthday tomorrow. Keanu listened intently, nodding. Then he turned back to Bradley, who now fidgeted uncomfortably behind his counter. So let me get this straight, Keanu said. This woman has banked here for 3 decades, knows her account number by heart, and you're refusing to assist her because she forgot one document. What happened next would be retold and shared across Los Angeles for months. But no one could quite capture the exact moment when everything changed. The moment Hollywood's most grounded star decided to teach a young assistant bank manager a lesson in humanity. Bradley's starched collar suddenly felt too tight. Keanu Reeves' presence had turned the bank's atmosphere from sterile efficiency into crackling tension. The other tellers had stopped their transactions, watching the drama unfold. Mr. Reeves, I understand your concern, Bradley began, his corporate training kicking in. But bank policy clearly states. I know what bank policy states, Keanu interrupted, his voice still calm but now carrying a quiet intensity that demanded attention. I also know about customer service, human dignity, and common sense. Tell me, have you checked your system? Surely, you have photos of longtime clients on file? Bradley's fingers hovered nervously over his keyboard. Well, yes, but... Then check, Keanu said simply, resting a gentle hand on Margaret's shoulder. Ms. Chen, would you mind giving your account number again? Margaret recited the numbers clearly, her voice steadier now with Keanu beside her. Reluctantly, Bradley entered the numbers. Her full account information appeared, including a photo from when she first opened the account. There, Keanu said. I see Ms. Chen's picture right on your screen, and she's standing right here. Are you suggesting this isn't enough identification? The growing crowd of customers had now formed a semicircle around teller 3. Many had taken out their phones to record. Bradley glanced nervously toward his supervisor's office, but the door stayed closed. It's just, there are procedures, Bradley stammered. If we make an exception, others might. Exceptions, Keanu replied, are exactly what we make when circumstances call for them. Ms. Chen isn't just another customer. She's entrusted this bank with her money for 30 years. Doesn't that loyalty deserve some consideration? A murmur of agreement spread through the crowd. I remember Ms. Someone said. She used to bring cookies during the holidays. She helped my daughter open her first savings account, added another voice. Bradley's face reddened. Mr. Reeves, with all due respect, you're not a bank employee. You don't understand that we must follow. You're right, Keanu said, his tone hardening. I'm not a bank employee. I'm a client, just like Ms. And I'm curious, if I came in one day without ID, would you treat me the same way? The question hung in the air like thunder. Bradley's silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, Keanu continued. Now, I'd like to speak with your actual branch manager. Not an assistant, the real manager. Patterson is in a meeting, Bradley said quickly, too quickly. Then I'll wait, Keanu said, dragging one of the cold metal stools over for Margaret. Ms., please sit. Can someone get her a glass of water? 3 people left the line at once to fetch water. The hesitant security guard brought over a cushion from the break room for Margaret's stool. As they waited, Keanu struck up a conversation with Margaret, genuinely interested in her story. Margaret spoke softly, her voice gentle but steady as she shared stories of James, her late husband. She told Keanu about their immigration journey from Hong Kong in the 1960s. The challenges, the sacrifices, the quiet victories. With a tender smile, she pulled out her flip phone, a modest device well worn by time, and showed him photos of her granddaughter. The pictures were grainy, but the pride in her eyes shone with perfect clarity. Keanu chuckled warmly as Margaret recounted tales of dance recitals, of glittery costumes and nervous little curtsies. The kind of stories grandparents tell not just with their words, but with their hearts. Around them, something unusual was happening. The other customers, instead of growing restless, formed a protective circle around Margaret. They stopped checking their watches, stopped huffing impatiently. They listened. Some shared their own experiences. Moments when banks had treated them poorly, when policies had been enforced with cold indifference instead of compassion. There were nods of agreement, sighs of empathy, even a few tears. It was no longer a bank lobby. It was a community in real time, drawing closer around a woman who had moments ago been humiliated for forgetting a piece of plastic. Bradley, still stiff behind the counter, tried to regain control. He called for the next customer in line. No one moved. Everyone was now part of something larger, an impromptu gathering of humanity. At the center sat Margaret and Keanu, not as a spectacle, but as a reminder of what dignity and empathy looked like. At last, the office door of the branch manager opened. Richard Patterson stepped out, immediately noticing the unusual hush in the lobby. A tall man in his 50s with graying hair and reading glasses perched low on his nose, he took in the scene, then froze as he recognized Keanu Reeves seated beside an elderly woman, clearly the center of attention. "What's going on here?" he asked, his eyes wide with concern. Before Bradley could answer, Keanu stood up. "Mr. Patterson," he said, calm but resolute, "we need to have a serious conversation about how your staff treats long-standing customers." The branch manager listened carefully as Keanu and several customers recounted the events. Margaret's forgotten ID, Bradley's refusal to help, the summoning of security. As the story unfolded, Patterson's face shifted from confusion to grim understanding. At the end, he turned to Margaret and said, "Mrs. I want to offer my sincerest apologies for what happened today. Of course, we will assist you with your transactions. I remember when you and Mr. Chen opened your account here. You used to help my mother practice her English every Thursday." Margaret's eyes sparkled with recognition. "Little Ricky, I didn't realize you've grown so much." He smiled warmly. "Yes, it's me. And I can't believe Bradley didn't call me the moment you arrived. Please come into my office. We'll take care of everything right away." As Margaret stood, supported gently by Keanu, Patterson turned to Bradley. "Mr. Cooper, please gather your belongings and come to my office after I finish assisting Mrs. Chun. We need to have a very serious conversation about customer service and the consequences of your decisions today." Bradley's face lost all color. He understood now that his rigid adherence to policy hadn't just embarrassed a valued client, it had become a public relations disaster. Videos of the incident were already spreading across social media. But the story wasn't over. What happened next wouldn't just change policies at First National Bank. It would become a shining example of how a single act of kindness can ripple across an entire community. In Richard Patterson's office, Margaret sat comfortably in a leather armchair while the manager processed her transactions. Keanu had politely declined Patterson's offer of privacy, stating he wanted to ensure everything was handled properly. His presence filled the room with a calm reassurance. "Mrs. Chun," Patterson said as he printed the receipts, "I've deposited your check and arranged the $200 withdrawal for your granddaughter's birthday. I'm also adding a special note to your account to prevent any future identification issues. Your face and your account number should be more than sufficient." Margaret smiled, her eyes misty with gratitude. But Keanu wasn't finished. "Mr. Patterson," he said, "while we appreciate your personal attention, I think there's a larger issue here. How many other elderly clients could be subjected to this kind of treatment?" Patterson sighed and removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You're absolutely right, mister. This incident exposed a serious gap in our training and policies. Bradley's behavior today does not represent who we are." Just then, a commotion stirred outside the glass walls of the office. Through the transparent panels, they could see Bradley angrily clearing his desk. His movements were sharp and chaotic, stuffing papers into his briefcase and muttering under his breath about unrealistic standards and celebrity interference. "I've terminated his employment," Patterson said calmly. "Today's actions were just the final straw. We've received several complaints about his lack of empathy and poor judgment. A number of elderly customers have stopped banking with us since he arrived. But until today, we didn't understand why." Keanu nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes, it takes a public moment to expose a private pattern, but firing one person doesn't fix a systemic issue. Which is why," Patterson replied, pulling out a notepad, "I'm proposing some changes. First, we're implementing a new training program specifically focused on serving elderly clients. Second, we're creating an emergency identification protocol for long-standing customers who may occasionally forget their documents. And third," he paused, looking at Margaret, We're rebuilding our Community Advisory Council, and I'd like Mrs. to be our first member. Margaret's eyes widened. Me? But I'm just a customer. You're not just a customer, Keanu interjected gently. You're a part of this community. You've banked here longer than most of these employees have been alive. Your experience matters. Outside, Bradley had just slammed his briefcase shut and was storming toward the exit. Several customers instinctively stepped aside, but their presence now served as silent witnesses to the consequences of cruelty. Then, something unexpected happened. Bradley stopped at the door. He turned abruptly and marched back toward Patterson's office, flinging the door open with force. His finger pointed accusingly at Margaret. "This is all your fault," he shouted. "If you had just followed the rules." He never finished the sentence. Keanu moved swiftly, stepping in front of Margaret. His posture was protective, his expression no longer kind. "That's enough," Keanu said, his voice quiet but unmistakably firm. "You've already lost your job. Don't make things worse." The security guard, who had been monitoring the situation closely, finally stepped in. "Sir, you need to leave the building now." Bradley's anger deflated into embarrassment as he realized everyone was filming his meltdown. Without another word, he turned and fled the bank. The sound of the glass door closing behind him marked the end of his banking career. After his departure, Patterson turned again to Margaret. "Now, about that position on the advisory council?" "I'll do it," Margaret said with surprising firmness. Her confidence had returned. "But I have one condition. I want to make sure we help other seniors understand their banking rights. Many of my friends are now too afraid to come to the bank alone. That has to change." Keanu smiled. "That's a great idea. Patterson," he added, "if you're serious about this advisory council, I'd like to help as well. Not as a celebrity, but as a regular customer who believes in treating people with dignity." Patterson looked as though he couldn't believe his luck. "Mister, your involvement would be invaluable. And Mrs., your condition is exactly what we need." Together, they outlined a new plan that would transform how First National Bank served its elderly clients. The Community Advisory Council would meet monthly to review policies and suggest improvements. They would arrange transportation for seniors who had trouble reaching the bank. And most importantly, they would launch a mentorship program pairing experienced clients with new bank employees to teach them the human side of banking. As they finalized the details, Margaret suddenly remembered something. "Oh, my granddaughter's birthday is tomorrow. Mr. Reeves, would you like to see her picture again? She's a huge fan of yours." Keanu's eyes twinkled. "I have a better idea. If it's all right with you, I'd love to come to the party. Every birthday girl deserves a special surprise." Margaret's face lit up like a lantern. She would be so thrilled. "But are you sure? You've already done so much." "It would be my pleasure," Keanu said warmly. "After all, you taught everyone here something important today. Sometimes, standing up for what's right means standing up for each other." As they walked out of the bank together, the customers erupted into applause. Someone had brought cookies from the cafe next door, and the lobby transformed into a spontaneous celebration. Margaret found herself surrounded by neighbors she hadn't even known before, sharing stories, laughter, and phone numbers. The videos of the incident didn't go viral for the drama, but for the hope. People shared the story not to shame a bank employee, but to honor a community that came together, and a movie star who reminded everyone that real heroes don't need scripts. Months later, First National Bank's Community Advisory Council had become a model for others to follow. Margaret's granddaughter had the best birthday of her life, with Keanu Reeves helping her blow out the candles. That photo now hung in the bank's lobby, proudly displayed next to a new customer bill of rights. As for Bradley Cooper, not the actor, it turned out to be surprisingly difficult for him to find another banking job in Los Angeles. It seemed that treating elderly clients with disrespect had lasting consequences. The latest word was he had moved to another city to start over, hopefully having learned a lesson in humility and humanity. Margaret still practices Tai Chi in the park each morning. But now, she's often joined by fellow seniors from the bank's community group, forming a network of friendship and support that goes far beyond finances. And every Thursday, just like the old days, she brings cookies to the bank. Not because she has to, but because that's what community means to her. The cold metal stools in the bank lobby were quietly replaced with comfortable chairs. Each one bears a small plaque. It reads, "Dignity has no expiration date." And if you look closely, the first chair, right beside teller 3, has a special dedication. In honor of Margaret Chen, as for Keanu Reeves, his bond with Margaret didn't end at the bank. He visited often, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with questions about life, and occasionally, just to sit by her orchids and listen. And then, there was Bradley Cooper, not the actor, but the former assistant manager whose fall from grace had become the stuff of whispered break-room conversations and meme-worthy social media posts. After his dismissal, he disappeared for a while. Some assumed he'd left the city. Others believed he was too proud to show his face again. But Keanu Reeves believed in second chances. One quiet Sunday afternoon, Keanu sat in the minimalist lounge of his custom motorcycle company, a place as un-Hollywood as he was. No paparazzi, no red carpets, just grease skiers, and the occasional barking of a retired stunt dog named Torque. His assistant knocked gently on the door. "There's a guy here to see you. Says you told him to come by, but he looks kind of nervous." Keanu stood and walked into the front shop. There, awkwardly dressed in a casual blazer 2 sizes too big, stood Bradley Cooper, holding a resume that looked freshly printed and a face that was anything but confident. "Bradley," Keanu said, with a quiet nod. "Mister," he stammered. "I wasn't sure you meant it. About the job." "I meant it," Keanu said simply, then handed him a wrench. "But we don't do suits here." Bradley looked down at the tool, then back at Keanu, unsure. "You want me to fix something?" "Not yet," Keanu replied, cracking a small smile. "First, I want you to shadow Manuel. He'll teach you the difference between a carburetor and a clutch. After that, we'll talk about humility and customer service." Bradley blinked. "Why are you doing this?" "After everything." Keanu's eyes softened. "Because in this world, a man shouldn't be remembered for the worst thing he's ever done, especially if he's willing to learn from it." Months later, Bradley wasn't just fixing bikes. He was learning how to build them. The same hands that once pointed customers toward policies now worked under lifted engines and grease-stained schematics. He started smiling more, even laughing with customers. Torque, the shop dog, adopted him instantly, a seal of approval stronger than any HR form. And when Margaret Chen visited the garage one sunny afternoon to see the shop Keanu had told her about, Bradley was the one who offered her tea and pulled up a seat beside a vintage Triumph. "I owe you an apology," he said, looking her in the eyes. Margaret smiled. "You already gave it by being here." And so the story of a bank, a grandmother, a forgotten ID, and an unexpected guardian angel ended not with viral videos, but with something far more lasting: change. Change in a bank's policies. Change in a man's path. Change in the way a community looked at itself. Because, as Margaret liked to say during council meetings, rules are important, yes, but kindness is what makes them human. And as for Keanu, at the last board meeting, when someone asked him what he'd learned through it all, he leaned back, took a sip of herbal tea Margaret had introduced him to, and said with a grin, "Well, I've learned this much. You can forget your ID, but never forget your humanity. One will get you kicked out of a bank. The other will get you a job at a motorcycle garage." Everyone laughed, especially Bradley. And just like that, they got back to business. Because in the end, compassion was the only currency that truly mattered. Thank you for watching. If the story warms your heart, subscribe to the channel and click the screen for more inspirational stories of resilience, compassion, and hope.